Welcome to the Healthcare Cure Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the bold mission of fixing healthcare. Now, here's your host, healthcare futurist, best-selling author, and adjunct professor, Nick Webb.
Hi, this is Nicholas Webb, and welcome to our very first podcast for Fixing Healthcare, the documentary. You know, this has been probably one of the most exciting projects I've ever been involved in my life, and the goal here is really colossal. The goal of fixing something that is so impactful to human life and yet so broken is probably one of the greatest challenges that I've ever been involved in. And what was great about the genesis of this entire project is I think the beauty of the way in which the story began. And I'd like to share and introduce my executive producer and clinical advisor and partner on the film, Fixing Healthcare, Dr. Power, so that he can share with you the story about how we met all those months ago in Dublin, Ireland.
Hi, Nicholas. And listen, it's absolutely a pleasure to join you on this journey. And as you say, it's not for the faint-hearted for us to be making a statement as profound as fixing healthcare. And what we're looking to do is indeed to create a movement that will bring with us our patient population group, our constituent group, as indeed you describe it, Nick, and also our caregiver group who are like-minded with us, and to empower our patients to look at a health model rather than a healthcare model for them to take responsibility for their own health and well-being. Where we started on this, Nick, was actually in February of 2019 here in Dublin's Fair City in Ireland, when you were the guest speaker at a very significant industrial presentation, which was to 1,500 professionals covering all the major industries. And I was so, I guess, inspired is the only word that I can clearly articulate my feeling at the time with your message, because I felt a real sense, a feeling of connectivity with your passion, which was to ask the hard questions around where has it gone wrong? Why have we got a model which is profoundly about intervening rather than preventing? And it's always been my ideology as a general practitioner to look at how can we help our patients to take responsibility for their own healthcare and their well-being. And I really was, I suppose, inspired to come and almost doorstop you after you came off the platform and introduce myself. And it led for me to be invited to visit your Center for Innovation at the Western University campus in Pomona in California last May to meet the fantastic team that you have at the Center for Innovation, and indeed Professor Daniel Wilson, who is the president of the university. So here we are, Nick. We're on a journey together, and we're planning over the next 6 months to collaborate at an international level to include at least a population group from the US, from Ireland, and from Australia to participate in this exciting journey.
Yeah, you know, it was what I remember about that evening. Of course, you know, after you get off a platform from speaking, you're a bit overwhelmed and exhausted. And I remember you coming up to me and saying, "Nick, you so nailed it. It's about the patient." And I have to say, you know, I've been in healthcare for 4 decades, and that's not the dialogue that I typically hear. I can remember the sound of my own heart breaking when I worked for Star Surgical nearly 40 years ago, selling intraocular lenses to ophthalmologists, and having the discussion rather than being really about the patient's experience and the clinical outcome. Even they were concerned more about the reimbursement of cataract surgery and the cost and the mechanics of this transaction, and so I don't know that that's representative of most caregivers, but it was so refreshing to hear your patient-centric view of the universe, and that was incredibly inspiring to me. And then for us to work together on this incredible project, which frankly is one of those kind of projects where you spend half of your time incredibly inspired and the half of the time, scared as hell because it's just such a big commitment, right?
Yeah, but Nick, you know what makes it really worthwhile is how, as we've articulated our movement and our endeavor to a very wide population now of experts covering all of the major disciplines in medicine, as well as patient representatives and representatives of healthcare organizations who actually really do get it. That's energizing, because there is definitely a view now that there is a big shift required for us, and ever more. As just to give you my personal experience, Nick, I was tested positive for the COVID virus just 2 months ago here in Dublin, and it really was a wake-up call for me about my own personal vulnerability, and indeed for Fionnuala and my two girls at home. And it, has reinforced for me how, if we had in 2020, which we should have, access to all of the data for our patients' vital signs, we can list them off, but absolute temperature, oxygen saturations, blood pressure, respiratory rate, heart rate variability, and sleep patterns, we would be able to predict and trace where the prevalence is, and it would have made a very significant difference to the penetration of the COVID virus. And I'm testimony to that myself and my own journey over the last few months. And Ireland has been hit, just like the US, very hard. And it's a journey that's going to be, another 12 to 18 months before we get that vaccine to be on top of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what I love about the way we have architected this film is to really take all of the uber complexity of what is broken in healthcare, because in order to identify what's broken, you have to look at reimbursement, the economic dynamics of the infrastructure that supports healthcare. You have to take a look at the epidemiology of disease processes, behavioral aspects, mental health. There are so many incredible components to the healthcare system that has to be analyzed to identify where there is opportunity to fix it. And I love the fact that we really brought that down into 4 clear tracks. Number one is patients want a beautiful consumerized experience. They are already starting to move away from traditional legacy healthcare to models that are fast and fluid and relevant and specific and customized and friction-free. The other track, of course, is how we structure and use technology in a way that protects patients' privacy while at the same time anticipates the movement of potential disease processes, including the way in which they manage existing disease processes. So the technology component is just going to explode, because when you think about it, we really have had a very slow evolution in technology and healthcare in many ways as it relates to being able to find problems with patients early on. And then, of course, the third component is, the need to restructure the incentives and value models so that caregivers, health systems, drug companies, device companies have incentives to help keep patients healthy rather than to just provide sickness interventions. And then lastly, and in my role as a chief innovation officer for one of the world's most comprehensive health science universities, I'm extremely passionate about healthcare education. And we have these amazing students that are going to go out into the world with a whole new quiver of resources and tools to be able to afford more time with our patients and to deliver a far, far better level of care than we could have ever imagined. So I love that we brought it down into these 4 categories that really create the net totality of where the opportunities are. And I really think that by the time we get to the end of this film, we really will have that prescription for what it takes to fix healthcare.
And one of the aspects which really connects us as well, Nick, is that we both truly value the rich relationship that exists in the right environment between patients and their caregiver, whether it be a physician assistant, a nurse, or a physician. And what we're looking at is how can we prepare our healthcare colleagues for the next generation. I always describe medicine as being both scientific and artistic. The science is obviously important, and we need to have that grounding in all of the scientific and clinical disciplines. And as well as that, we need to be mentored, coached into how to be compassionate, considerate, empathetic physicians and nurses and PAs. And what we're looking at is to explore how can we enrich that environment by helping to translate some of the data through the use of artificial intelligence, and also to provide an environment that attracts patients through customer orientation to have time with their care provider, to enrich that really rich experience. I call it the secret sauce. It's the elixir. And as I've been describing our journey with fixing healthcare to my colleagues in Ireland and in Australia and in America, in the States, I've been so humbled with the response I've got from some incredible professors who have been at that artistic endeavor for 6 decades now, and who will be participating in sharing their message of their life's work, which is such a noble purpose. And I really believe that our journey is to blend the scientific and artistic approaches together so that patients can be empowered to stay healthy rather than seeking another prescription or seeking another procedure when it mightn't necessarily be required.
Absolutely. And, that's what I love is that we were able to find some of the coolest people with such amazing stories and with such great expertise that I really think that, and, here we are early May with the goal of having our premiere in early November. And so literally as people
That's
listen.
right. So we're going to have a premiere in the US and here in Ireland and in Australia. And it's a big ask to have that accomplished in 6 months. But we've already engaged a wonderful production house in Journeyman. I really am impressed with their professionalism. Yeah. And we will certainly be on target to achieve those deadlines because it's an important message to complete and to make sure we get that message out to the movement.
Yeah, and I love the fact that he believes in what we're doing. I mean, I think one of the things that was really great about having the incredible opportunity to partner with you on this film is the fact that you and I early on agreed that this is not about box office sales. It's not about any of that. It's about, can we change the conversation? You think about so many documentaries like Fast Food Nation or Super Size Me, where McDonald's is the enemy, or other documentaries that try to find drug companies or hospitals or medical device. It's so easy to find villains, but at the end of the day, we want to have impact with this film. We want it to really change the conversation. I don't think that looking at what's at people from a good guy, bad guy perspective really gets us where we want to go. We want to change the conversation. We want to start a movement. We want to reestablish the importance relationship where doctors are back in charge and patients are able to have access to their doctors, and that we're blending partnerships that have them focus on prevention and wellness over just the sort of trigger mechanism of treatment intervention. And so I'm really excited about the approach that we're taking.
And Nick, it's about giving patients a voice and to make sure that the relationship is truly a partnership where our patients trust the message they get from their caregivers, and the caregivers are providing that environment which really does envelop that type of engagement in a rich way and gives time for that to flourish. And our message hopefully will resonate with our colleagues who are going through college at the moment and who are going through their specialist training, that they will understand that it's kind of like Back to the Future. You, Nick, have written a great book called The Healthcare Mandate. And in your opening page, you describe your relationship with a wonderful doctor, Dr. Mali Mickelson, from a rural practice in Iowa. And, I feel so passionate that the way that Dr. Mickelson practiced in the 50s and 60s is the way forward. Yeah. And that is what we want to create an environment to perpetuate.
Right. Somehow in the process of creating the machinery of the healthcare industrial complex, we pushed the Dr. Michelsons of the world to the side. And I had the great honor of meeting Dr. Michelson, over 25 years ago, who spent 50 years carrying a doctor bag from house to house in a rural farm community. And the stories that he told me about the relationships that he built, he understood his customers not as a biological node. He understood them as humans that lived within a family ecosystem. And by understanding the nature of how they lived, he was able to not just treat them, he was able to help them maintain a healthy state and to deliver beautiful, safe, and clinically efficacious experiences. And somehow the machinery of healthcare has gobbled up the Dr. Michelsons of the world, and patients want their doctor back, and doctors want that relationship back with their patients. When I watch students being graduated at our university, I'm always sad to know that we're releasing them into the wild with two major deficiencies. One is time and the other is data. And as we talk about in this film, the good news is that we have the ability to give doctors really, really good data and even allow them to automate the ability of keeping an eye on their patient in a way that's thoughtful and private, while at the same time giving them the time resource back so that they can not just talk about treatment options, but talk about prevention options. And I think that is the only way that we can build a future and scalable program. And we have to realize that when you look at the epidemiology of chronic disease in combination with the silver tsunami of aging populations and the increased escalation of the machinery around healthcare, you literally get to a point of a complete disaster within the next 5 years. It's just not going to scale. When you combine that with the COVID-19 scenario, we really are at a time of an emergency. We have to fix healthcare. And I really think that in some way, and maybe in some meaningful way, this documentary will have a big impact on changing that conversation.
I agree with that, Nick. And in closing, I just want to mention that this will be a fun journey too. The first phase is the next 7 months, where we want to connect with like-minded patients and colleagues all around the world and go on this journey together. And we really are open-minded. I love positive energy and solution-orientated rather than just problem-orientated thinking. And it's a rich privilege for us to be going about this project in a way where we're actually creating a force for a very positive development, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah, me as well. Well, Ray, I am so glad that you are taking this journey with me. It's a little scary, but if it's not scary, it's not fun, right? And I think we have a mission here that really matters to both of us. I think that this could have a lot of amazing impact on patients and the industry that we've lived in for all of our professional careers. So thanks again. We'll be doing this once a week, and we'll be bringing in some of our cast members each week to talk about their expertise and bringing in their voice as a sneak peek prior to the release of the film. So I hope that you continue to join us every week as we put out our podcast to talk about the way in which we can fix healthcare and make it a lot better. Thanks so much, Ray. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks a million to everyone for listening too.
You've been listening to the Healthcare Cure podcast. Don't forget to visit our website at thehealthcarecure.com. And thanks for listening.